Welcome to the show, Pat.
Thank you. It's great to be here, Sarah.
I'm so glad to get to have this time and chat with you. You and Kim are two of our closest friends in LA, but it's really special to get to have this really focused time to have a deep conversation. So thanks for taking the time to be here.
Excited for the conversation.
Let's start. I want to start at the beginning. Growing up, I know a big part of who you are is this idea of serving a greater good. That
Hmm.
seems like it's kind of part of the fabric of who you are and been a guiding light in your life. Is this something that was part of your childhood that was ingrained in you? Like, do you know where this came from?
It's a great question. When I was growing up, my father, he was very clear in how I should approach life. He said, in life, you're always going to be faced with decisions, and 99.99% of the time, in any decision that you face, the hard way is the right way. He said, if you just choose the hard way, everything will work out. I guarantee it. And so he beat that drum so much over the course of my life that it put me on some paths that I think led me to this place where service and purpose and mission are really important to me. And so, one of the first formative experiences I think that I had with this was in high school. I went to a Jesuit high school in Dallas, and at Jesuit, one of the key messages they come back to over and over again is that you should be a person in service to others, a man for others. And so, again, this was a drum that continued to be beat all 4 years of high school, and even senior year. Small things like they would set a day aside Tuesdays for community service, and so seniors would spend most of their Tuesdays every week going out and doing community service projects, getting out into the community and finding ways to give back. And I didn't fully appreciate how much that shaped me until I got further and further from that experience. And so I've only grown more appreciative over time that really this idea of being a man for others and being someone that has a bias for action, a bias for serving things outside myself, has really become a part of who I am, and drives a lot of value for me. And so coming out of high school, again, this take the hard road led me to, I was fortunate enough to get accepted to get an appointment to the Naval Academy. And there at the academy, again, it was, you're constantly being taught these lessons of leadership, and why leadership is important and why it is ultimately an act of service. And so again, you just this constant drumbeat of serve, serve, serve. And then out of the academy, I was fortunate enough to find my way into SEAL training, and then spent just over 9 years in the SEAL teams. And again, that just took it to another level where you are put in situations alongside people where the everything is about serving something outside yourself, right? When we talk about another SEAL, we don't say that that person is really good at running or swimming or does a lot of pull-ups. We say, yeah, he's a good team guy, because that is just so central to the thing that allows us to be successful, whether in training, doing exercises, or doing operations overseas. That you're constantly thinking about how you can serve your teammates, the team, the mission, your country, that it just becomes a part of who you are. And so I really like that question, and something I think a lot about, and I've thought a lot about over the years since I've left the teams. I left the SEAL teams in 2011. And I think in many ways, transitioning out of the military is hard, no matter, if you're in for 5 years or 10 years or 20 years, because you don't realize how much service has become a part of the fabric of who you are. Because in the SEAL teams, every day, whether you're working out or you're shooting on the range or you're jumping out of planes or even you're overseas, everything you do is viewed through this lens of, is it helping or hurting our ability to achieve the mission, to serve something bigger than ourselves? And when you leave that community, or when you take off the uniform and you find yourself outside of that, it can be a little bit disorienting, because you're asking yourself, like, wow, okay, what am I serving now? Like, what is the mission? And if you can't find that, it can be a real struggle. And I think the guys, that men and women that transition out of service, have a really hard time if they can't figure out what they're serving next.
You mentioned kind of this idea of coming out of the teams, trying to figure out like what's next, what am I here to do. A big theme on this show is talking about purpose and what we're here for. And I've heard you say before that, kind of jokingly almost, that like you don't have any, you're not like really great at one thing, but you're really
Mm,
good, really hard worker. And that grit and determination has really served you, which is such an amazing attribute. Alongside that, do you believe that we each have an individual purpose that we were put on the planet for? And it's like a theme, like a thread that kind of goes through our life, so that you,
mhm,
maybe it's similar to being a SEAL, it's this thread that then you take into another chapter. What is your feeling on purpose
mm.
is my question.
I think we all have a unique purpose so long as we believe that we have a unique purpose and we're willing to put the effort in to figure out what that is, right? You are different than me, right? We're not, my wife is different than me. Even my brothers, we grew up in the same household. We're all different because we experienced different forces through our life, right? We had different conversations, we had different friction, we had different environments, we had different things that shaped us that have formed our perceptions and our views and our strengths and our attributes in such a way that we have something of value that only we can offer this world or the people that we come into contact with. And it is, I think, in many respects, putting forth the effort and having the courage to figure out what your purpose is, what that thing is that you care that much about and that only you can do is really really important and matters, and not only matters for yourself and those you interact with, but when you can identify what your purpose is, what drives you, you can endure far more than you ever thought possible, right? And we hear all the time around where people are doing something that they love so it doesn't feel like they're working very hard, and I've seen that time and time again. People that can do extraordinary things and can go longer, harder, faster, can endure, really big setbacks, but can endure them with grace and humility and can continue to progress forward because they have identified that thing that's pulling them forward, that purpose. So I think it's really important.
We'll circle back to this idea of purpose later, because I think your company Madefor, obviously the name within itself, talks about what are we made for? What are we here
Mm.
for? So we'll come back to that in a little bit, but I want to start a little bit further back in your story now. I know how much you love the water and you love these ocean swims, and you obviously were a Navy SEAL for 9 years. And I'm just curious to hear about your relationship with water in general. It's obviously something that you love, even after your time in the SEALs. And Rory loved getting into the water with you and do these long swims. And it seems like it's such a big part. What is it that you love about the water?
I, at a very young age, got exposed to the ocean, and my great grandmother had this small house up in Massachusetts, close to the water, and I used to spend my summers up there. She was this old Polish woman that would walk 2 miles to the grocery store and carry her groceries and walk
Oh,
back, and those summers were some of my favorite childhood memories. But something that really shaped, I think, in many ways who I am is that we were right next to the ocean, and I was in the water every single day. I was either swimming, I was diving, I was looking for treasure, I was exploring. It just, I was going into places or jumping off cliffs into water that frankly scared me a little bit. Like I was always a little fearful of sharks and I wasn't sure what that was in there, but or what was underneath the surface of the water. But I was in a place where I felt comfortable enough to get outside of my comfort zone and do that in the ocean, where you have to give up a certain amount of control, right? The water is going to take you where it's going to take you. And if you try to fight against that, if you're in big surf, you're only going to burn oxygen, and you're only hurting your ability to perform in the water or do what you're trying to do. And so there's something about having to submit to the fact that you don't have total control, that the ocean gets a vote, but that in submitting to the ocean, um, you gain an ability to move with it and be in partnership with it, that I think is really, really cool and really special. So um, from the time that I was a young kid to when I was 13 years of age, I grew up in Texas, but we moved to Manhattan Beach, California for about a year and a half. And it's the first time I started surfing, and every day I was in the water, before school and after school. And my love for the water has just continued to grow with time. So it's probably not a coincidence that I ended up in a profession where I spent a lot of time in the water, albeit I have the unfortunate characteristic that I get seasick. And so being a SEAL that gets seasick is not an attribute that you want to have. I've even gotten seasick surfing before. And so, but nevertheless, every time I spend time in the ocean, I feel restored and recharged in a way that I can't recreate any other way. So
I was dying when I was researching this and I heard the seasick thing. I was absolutely dying. I didn't know that about you. And I think that's, oh my gosh, it's like just a whole nother hurdle to have to overcome with all the other things you have to figure out when you're a SEAL. But I thought that's amazing. Okay, so when did you decide you wanted to be a SEAL?
when I was in seventh grade, I read a book by a gentleman named Dick Marcinko. The book is called Rogue Warrior, and it is it's nonfiction, but there's probably a little bit of mythic narrative that gets overlaid on the top of this book. But for whatever reason, when I read this, every page I was like more and more drawn to this profession. It were these people that were doing something that was incredibly hard and something that not everyone could do. They were doing it with a small group of people, and they were having these really large effects in the areas that they were working in. And there was the sense of adventure, of camaraderie, of challenge, of purpose that was woven together in a way that I hadn't seen before. And for this young, seventh grader who was probably a little husky and had never successfully run a mile in under, I don't know, 12 minutes, and like for whatever reason, when I read this book, I was like, that's what I want to do. Like, that's it. And that planted the seed that just continued to grow over time. And so every year that passed by, I started taking steps closer and closer towards that goal. And I think I was in a meeting with the guidance counselor of my high school as a sophomore. And he said, here's a list of schools, pick what schools you think you're interested in, and then we'll build a plan around those. I said, all right, great. And so I was going down this list and picking off some schools that I thought I might try to play football at. And then I saw that there was this school called the Naval Academy. And I was like, oh, Navy, like I wanted to do the SEAL thing. Like I'll put that on there. And so when I met with the guidance counselor, we went to review the list. He was going over the football schools and he was like, yeah, we can do this. We can do this. And he saw the Naval Academy. He's like, yeah, probably not. And I was like, wait a second. What do you mean probably not? He's like, that's really hard to get into and you don't have good grades. And that's probably just not something that you're going to achieve. And I don't know if it was intentional on his part. His name is David Oglesby. So I'll give him some props here. I don't know if that was an intentional comment that he made one way or another, but for whatever reason, as soon as he said that, it gave me the orientation that I needed to say, well, that's what I'm doing. And I doubled down. And for me, the Naval Academy became synonymous with this idea of wanting to be a SEAL. And so that next year in high school, at the end of my junior year, I received this award, the scholarship for the most improved student. I ended up being the captain of the football team my senior year, alongside a couple of other friends, and everything just kind of fell into place. Over the course of my life, I've been been so fortunate to have people give me the right challenge at the right time, and something that I was able to connect with in a way that it clarified all of my efforts going forward. Right? I want to be a SEAL. All right, I need to do these things. Wanted to get into Jesuit. I need to do these things. Wanted to get in the Naval Academy. I need to do these things. And so I didn't have to float around or not, move with uncertainty. I could move with conviction and purpose and know this is where I'm going. And this step is either helping me get closer towards that or it's taking me further away from that. So for someone that does not have any, and I say this with all humility, I don't have any natural gifts. Like nothing has ever come easy to me, but I have been given, or something I lean on quite often is just tenacity and grit and staying with something. But I think I can only stay with something as long as I believe in it. And if I really believe in something, then I can endure a lot.
So you get to the Naval Academy, and that's hard enough as it is. And through this, you want to become a SEAL. So those 4 years, what are you doing to try to achieve that goal? And another thing I'm always curious about, it's only 16 people from the graduating class. Is that right?
Yes.
So does everybody kind of know by the time they're going to make the announcement? Does everybody kind of know like who those people are going to be? Or is it like maybe it's out of 20 people and there's like people on the edge? Like, I was just curious how obvious it is.
Yeah. Well, I thought when I got accepted to the Naval Academy that that meant that I was going to be a SEAL, and that the hard work was done, and now I just had to get ready to show up to SEAL training in 4 years, and that would be it. And so when I finished football my senior year, when we had our last game, I stopped lifting weights for the first time. I started running and swimming and doing push-ups and pull-ups, things that I'd never done before. And I went from 235 pounds to maybe 193 pounds
Oh, wow.
when I started the academy. And I showed up. You go through plebe summer, which is it's kind of like a boot camp for 2 months, and you're running around and marching and learning how to be a good person in the military, get indoctrinated. My roommate at the academy was a gentleman named Daniel Thomas, DT. DT was a football player. And so while we were going through plebe summer, he was being pulled out to go to football practice and do these things that were outside of marching and drill. And I was like, man, maybe I need to play football. And so there was a portion during the summer where they said, hey, if anyone wants to try to walk onto the team, you can. And so I was like, in my mind, I was still the big guy. And I was like, well, I could do that. And so I went in to walk on, and very quickly after a day realized that I'm no longer a football player, and like I'm not going to be successful here. And so I started looking around like, well, what am I going to do? And I also found out about the same time that you have to compete for a slot to SEAL training, that it's not just whoever wants to go gets to go. And that it's probably one of the most competitive things that you can do out of the academy, because in my class, maybe we started with 150 people freshman year that wanted to be SEALs, and every year it got whittled down a little bit. But by the time we were seniors, we had a group of probably 65 or 70 midshipmen that were very competitive, very physically gifted, academically gifted, and could have been successful in the SEAL teams. And so
Can I
I was
interrupt you for 1 second? So
yeah.
when you want to be a SEAL, what is that even? Are you doing different things than everybody else through those years?
Yeah, so every year you're doing different physical selection tests, you're doing screening tests, and so you're
Okay.
constantly getting racked and stacked against your peers. During the summers, you're doing different military training. So people that want to become SEALs go to, at the time was called mini buds. It's a little bit of like a SEAL boot camp, and there you're getting evaluated, and so you're constantly being evaluated and assessed.
Okay.
I found out that every year a couple of boxers would get slots to SEAL training
Mm.
if you did well in boxing. And so when the football thing didn't work out, and I heard about the boxing, I said, well, I'll just box. I'll figure that out. And so I ended up boxing for 4 years and had some success there. And that I think that was a big part of how I ended up getting a slot to SEAL training. But so my class of the 65 people, 16 got slots, and then of those 16 people that got picked, 15 of them were successfully made it all the way through training, which in a program where the attrition rates are usually 80 to 85 to sometimes 90%. There's even been a class where no one graduated. Um, 15 of 16 people making it through just shows how rigorous the selection and the assessment is coming out of the academy. So,
Yeah. Wow. Okay. Now, I don't want to talk about it too long, but I mean, everybody's fascinated with Hell Week. Like, that
uh-huh.
just is such a fascinating, notorious training, crazy regimen that you guys go through. And something that I really continually explore on this show is this idea of finding comfort in the discomfort. And I
Mm-hmm.
can't think of many things more uncomfortable than probably what you went through during that training.
Mm.
So, two things. Well, actually, one thing that I was thinking about um, is that Rory and I did this psychotherapy training, and a part of the thing was you were doing this breath work, and the goal was to be able to contain more discomfort. And they compared it to like you're widening your container for discomfort and also your container for joy, because some people have a difficulty containing joy, and some people have a difficulty, I mean, we all have difficulty usually containing discomfort, and it really takes practice and these little steps of like opening this container and being like, okay, I can stay present in this discomfort. I can feel the things I'm feeling. I can stay here, and I cannot use whatever techniques we learned as children, which is like splitting off or numbing out or,
Mm-hmm.
the fight, flight, all that. So That was something that we studied, and I always think of it like this container for joy, or when really good things happen, some people can't contain that. They like want to distract themselves or think of something else because it's like, oh, I might lose this. So we all have different thresholds, I feel like, for the good and the bad. And as a SEAL, I imagine that you just are so deeply trained to have this incredible threshold for discomfort,
Mm.
right? I mean, this is just an assumption that I'm making, and I'm so interested to hear what your experience was in general in finding ways to find comfort in the discomfort, because I think we can all really apply that during this particular time, during this
Mhm.
pandemic. There's a lot out of our control. And I feel like you probably have a lot of great wisdom on the topic.
One of the probably the worst places to be in SEAL training is running with a boat on your head. And so you get broken up into boat crews of 6 people. And especially during Hell Week, we have these IBSs. They're inflatable rubber boats that you have to run everywhere with. And so whether you're in the water, you're paddling, or you're out of the water and you're moving, um, running to eat lunch, or you're going somewhere, everywhere you go, you're running with this boat on your head. And when you're running, the boat is bouncing and it rubs. By the time you get to the end of Hell Week, everyone has a bald spot where their hair has been rubbed off.
Wow.
And it's an insufferable place to be. Like, I'll be the first to say there is no comfortable place under that boat unless you duck your head, and then you're not doing your teammates any favors. But um, it's not a comfortable place to be. And I can't think of a moment where I found comfort under the boat, but it's something that you still have to deal with and go through, right? And so I think about what were the things that allowed me and allow thousands of others people to go through this training successfully. I think there's 2 things. One is really understanding, to bring it back to purpose, like, why am I doing this? Like, what's driving me, right? Is it because I have something to prove to someone else? Is it because I have something to prove to myself? Is it because I really care about this country and the ideals that we're founded upon, and this is about serving that? Is it whatever that thing is for you? You have to figure that out. The stronger you're connected to that bigger purpose, the greater your capacity to endure is, right? And so I think that's the first part. I think the second part is um, this ability to um, move, to manage the finish line, and to move that, whether it's a finish line, or Andrew Huberman, our lead advisor, head of our advisory board at Madefor, he and I like to call it the horizon, but to recognize that you have the capacity to move the horizon to a place that you feel comfortable being in pursuit of, right? Only you control that. And so if I'm running with a boat on my head, I don't have to make it all the way to the chow hall, which is a mile away in soft sand. I don't even have to make it the next 200 yards. There may be a point in time where the only place I know for certainty that I can make it is my eyes can see 10 yards in front of me, and I know I can get 10 more yards, right? And so that's the new horizon. I'm going to move towards that because I feel comfortable being in pursuit of that. And once I get there, I'm going to figure out what my next horizon is. So it's this idea that, and we all know this small steps over time, or you don't. I'm terrible at whatever these stories are, but like, you don't tackle everything all at once and break it down into bite-sized parts. But there's something additional about recognizing that you control what that horizon is that you're moving towards. And so I think those 2 things together, being very clear on your purpose and what's driving you and why this matters, why is this significant to you, that can be the thing that allows you to just go much further and endure much more. And then there are going to be times where the pain or the stress or whatever it is you're facing, whether it's COVID and you're locked at home, or you're dealing with screaming children, where you don't feel like you can take anymore and you really can't connect with that purpose in that moment. But knowing that you can control the finish line, that I don't have to make it through the day. I just got to get through this meal with my children, or I
Mm-hmm.
just have to make it until my husband gets home, or until I get to the grocery store. Whatever the thing is, that you have that ability to control it. And so that's something that I certainly leaned on heavily during training, and in the operations and post. And the one time where, and I think I may have talked about this before, but when Hell Week started, it had been something that I had been thinking about almost every day for going on, I don't know, 10 years, 12 years. I had been thinking about this moment from the time I first read Rogue Warrior until the time that Hell Week started. And I remember when we started, it started on a Sunday evening. It was probably 10 o'clock at night. They'd kept us on these boats, those old World War II amphibious landing crafts. And so we were kept inside these boats, and they were driving them around the ocean for a couple of hours and telling us that they were going to take us to San Clemente Island, and that we were going to do Hell Week out there. And sea spray was coming over the boats, and so we're already cold and wet, and we hadn't really been sleeping very much for the last couple of days, and tired and exhausted, and everyone had some kind of low grade pneumonia or cold, so we weren't in a great state of mind. It's not like we were perfectly um, conditioned or prepped to do this really hard physical event. We started at a big deficit, and finally they stopped the boats and they dropped the front of them down, and we were about a mile off the coast of the center there in Coronado, and they said, "All right, everyone, get in the water and swim to shore." And so,
Oh,
hop in the cold, dark Pacific, and we swim to shore, and we get there, and they're like, "All right, Hell Week's about keeping you on your toes. Everyone, drop down and knock out 50 push-ups or 20 push-ups. Go to your rooms, and we're going to start this all again tomorrow." So we did our 20 push-ups, and then as soon as we were getting ready to run off towards our rooms, these instructors came over the berms with these guns and started firing simunitions and loud, and we were running around, and it was chaotic. And I just remember thinking to myself at that moment, when I knew that we were starting Hell Week, that in many respects it was like being on a roller coaster that's clicking up this hill. And it's like, all right, we're on this roller coaster now. There's no getting off. Like, I'm going to be up for the next 5.5 days. I'm already cold, and I'm going to be cold and wet for the next 5.5 days. I'm going to be, I'm already tired, and I'm going to get more, all of these things. And I just remember thinking, wow, the enormity of this. I've been waiting for this moment for so long. Here it is. We've started. There's no getting off. And as soon as I started to think about that, I was like, man, it's too much information to process. Like, I can't swallow all of that right now. So I am just going to focus on, where's my swim buddy? And let me make sure I stay with my swim buddy and try to keep my hat on my head. And like, that became my new horizon. And that game I continued to play over the course of the rest of the week. It was like, what are these short-term horizons that I feel comfortable being in pursuit of? And you just were alone with your thoughts, thinking back to, why am I doing this? Why do I care about this? Why does this matter? And those two things, you know, let me make it.
so after kind of enduring all of this stuff and being a SEAL, I mean, that's just the beginning of it. Then you're a SEAL for 9 years. Does it take a lot to rattle you in everyday life now, because you've endured this crazy suffering, and for all that you've gone through as a SEAL? You seem like you're very even keeled and very steady. Is that because you're a SEAL, or is that inherently who you were?
I think there's some forging that happens during your time in special operations or in the military or in the SEAL teams, where um, you get less emotionally reactive, because at the end of the day, what SEALs do really, really well, and better than most, is that they find a way to be relevant and effective in any environment under any circumstance. And so the name SEAL is an acronym for sea, air, and land, right? So we're comfortable working in the water and out of the water, skydiving in, working on land. And, as evidence since 9/11, we've worked all over the world, right? A lot of times outside of water. Sometimes we work with host nation partners. Sometimes we work with interagency partners, but we're really attuned and comfortable at figuring out how to be effective in an environment. And one of the things that you learn very early on is that getting anxious, or raising your voice, or getting really emotional about something may not always be in service to that mission or help you be most effective. And so something as simple as, when you go on target, or when you're training in the house, very quickly you learn to modulate your voice, similar to what fighter pilots do when they're talking. When you hear a fighter pilot talking on the radio, it sounds like he's about to fall asleep. he's doing that because in controlling your voice, you control your emotional state, which has impacts on your physiological state, and it allows you to make rational decisions and to constantly figure out how to put yourself in the best position to affect the environment. And so I think just existing in a number of environments that are stressful and maybe at times chaotic, and in having to find different ways to find comfort in the discomfort, or to at least not react towards discomfort in a way that hinders your ability to be effective, you do internalize that, and that becomes a part of who you are. And so um, maybe there was some disposition of that prior to going into the SEAL teams, but it's certainly something that's been reinforced, and that I found value in even outside the teams, especially with 13-month-old twin girls.
Oh yeah, we're familiar with that. Oh, I forgot to mention that our kids are 1 week apart, and Pat has 2 beautiful twin girls, and we have a son, Jackson, as listeners know. But it's been really fun because we've really been on this journey with you guys, hand in hand, in the same age, same phase of childhood, and it's pretty amazing.
It's been amazing. And I will tell you, one of the things that just stands out for me is seeing how gracefully you endured your pregnancy, because I know it was not easy, and you were so sick and, physically ill the entire time, but you just had such a great attitude. And I think, in many ways, this comes back to what we're talking about around purpose. Like, you were able to assign a bigger value to your suffering. Like, there was a reason behind it. And I'm projecting now, but I'm assuming that is how, maybe what you leaned into and what allowed you to be
100%.
so graceful through that process, because I would have been shut down by that. Like, there's nothing I hate more, someone that gets seasick, than being nauseous. I couldn't imagine being nauseous for 9 months. I just couldn't. I can't even fathom it.
It was not easy, but you were nauseous for 9 years.
Yeah, it's wild. No good deed goes unpunished. One of the roles that I held in the SEAL teams was, I spent a couple of years on a SEAL delivery vehicle team, so SDV for short. And these are mini submarines that we use to conduct certain types of operations. And basically, the way that the SDV works is that you have a pilot and a navigator that sit up in the front of the SDV, little mini submarine. And then in the back of the boat, we call it a boat, you have 4 people, and that's your reconnaissance team or your sniper team. And I was always in charge of the guys in the back of the boat. And so they're wet submersibles. We launch them off really big submarines, but the way that it works is you climb up and you get into space. And by the time, you get in the back of the boat, and your swim buddy gets in, and then the 2 other guys get in, and they close the doors, you're on oxygen. It's pitch black. You can't see anything. The big submarine fills up with water, and the water fills up in your little submarine. And so the doors that slide shut have seams on them, so water is flowing in and out. And
Wait,
you
like
get
it's
in
all
this,
the
and
way
by the
the
time,
water's all the way to the top?
all the way to the top, yeah. So you're on a regulator, and
Why?
you're breathing through a regulator. It makes it well, one, it's probably really they're working on a system now that, so it's not this way. And so part of it is just legacy, but part of it is that if you don't have to have you have to have a much bigger footprint if you have a self-contained system, because then you
Okay.
have to lock out of that to get out of it, and make sure that electronics get preserved. And so the SDV, when I was using it, was essentially like an Atari video game that and in a closet that fills up with water. And so you'd sit, but by the time everybody got inside, you'd have about this much room to move your hands and figure out where your emergency regulator is. And the SDV would drive off of the big submarine, and you would be in there for 5, 6, 7 hours. And this is the ride to get to where you're going, so that you can go and do the work that you're going to do. And the really challenging part about that job is that, one, you go through so many different phases. So the first phase is, all right, I was hot because I've been in a wetsuit, and I've been sitting in this dry deck shelter, and it's 100 degrees, and it's 100% humidity. And so when they finally fill it up with water, you're like, all right, I'm cooled off and I feel good. And then you start going, and about 30 minutes in, you get a little chill, but it's okay because you've been drinking a lot of water, and you can pee in your wetsuit, and that warms you up for a little bit. But maybe an hour in, you've run out of pee, and so now you're cold. And then 2 hours in, because where the STV we fly these STVs in a place that you're still susceptible to open ocean swells. And so you're still getting the rocking and the motion and the movement, but you don't have the
Oh,
benefit of looking out at a horizon. And so you
it's
get,
just completely black.
it's just black. Yeah,
Oh
it's
my
just black.
God.
Occasionally someone will break a chem light and you'll play a game back there with your three other buddies. But it's black and so you don't see horizon. And so then you're getting sick and you're throwing up in your regulator.
Oh
And
my
then because you don't
God.
have any fluids, you're cramping, but because there's so many people back there, you don't have any room to move. And so this is like the ultimate horizon adjustment game where you're constantly saying to yourself, all right, I can make it 5 more minutes, or I'm going to make it to the point where I start cramping or until I start throwing up. Like you're constantly recalibrating what it means to be comfortable. But it's funny, I was talking with my friend Kevin, who's a rock climber yesterday, and Kevin has this great term. He calls it type 2 fun. He said, type 2 fun is the kind of fun that when you're going through it, it's actually not that fun. It's pretty miserable and entails a lot of suffering. But when you get past it, you look back on it as some of the best times of your life and like
Mm.
things that really enrich your life and are rewarding. And I'll be honest, like going to an SDV team was the last thing that I wanted to do. Being seasick is the last thing that I want to feel. But some of my fondest memories from my time in the SEAL teams are back inside that SDV with those 3 other guys or with those 5 other guys. I mean, it's the best. It was the ultimate type 2 fun. So I feel forever grateful for having had that experience.
Yeah, it goes back to what your dad was saying about kind of making the hard choice, taking the harder route, maybe.
Yeah.
But yes, thank you for honoring my grace during the pregnancy. That was definitely not easy, and like you said, it really was all about this greater mission and understanding that this was like the greatest, for me, like one of the greatest gifts is to be able to have a child and to be able to grow this like miraculous human inside of me. So there was truly no greater purpose to feel
Mhm.
sick for 9 months for me personally. So, but that was not easy. But and I don't look back on it, to your point, with great fondness, but I do look back on the day that he was born as, the best day of our lives. So
Yeah.
it was all certainly worth it.
It's amazing. I mean, you and Kim, and I think until you're able to witness it as a husband or see day to day, really the struggles that have to be endured or the stress that has to be endured in order to bring a life into this world and then to care for that life and to keep it alive. I just have so much appreciation and gratitude for moms. I mean, it is like, I think it makes SEAL training look like a walk in the park. I really do.
I
So,
remember you saying that
yeah.
early on, like when they weren't, when they were really young and not sleeping as much, you being like, this is harder than any deployment I ever had,
Oh yeah, I
This,
mean it's like Hell Week except there's no bell to ring to like there's no instructor there offering you donuts and hot coffee and ring the bell and you get to warm up. It's like nope, wake up
this is
and you're
it.
going to be awake and here you go.
Oh man. Okay, so then after 9 years, you leave the Steels. How is that transition for you going back into regular life?
It was really challenging. Having the decision to leave the teams or making the decision to leave the teams was probably one of the hardest decisions professionally that I've ever had to make. I, for all intents and purposes, grew up in that community from the time I was 18 at the Naval Academy, surrounded by other people that would go on to be SEALs and being focused on that. That was some of the most formative years of my life. And I don't think you recognize the power of being in a community of like-minded professionals, of committed professionals with that share the same ethos as and ideology. Like you don't recognize the power of that until you're no longer in that. And so for me, when I was trying to make the decision to, whether or not it was time to transition out and do something else, the thing that allowed me with peace of mind to make the transition is that, or with relative peace of mind, was that I recognized that I love diving, I love shooting, I love demolition, blowing things up, and I love, um, you know, I love the mission and everything that we're doing. But ultimately, what I really connected to, first, I think, is my teammates and serving my teammates and my team and mission. But it was this idea that with a small group of people, with the right level of commitment and with limited resources, you could make a really positive outsized effect. And I loved that, right? As an officer in the teams, you work side by side with your teammates in a troop or in a platoon to hopefully create really positive effects. And so I love that. And so in my mind, I was like, all right, that's the through line for me. I'm transitioning out of the teams, but I still want to work with small teams of committed people to do big things that matter and that make a positive difference. And so I left with this mindset of, all right, I'm going to go to business school. I'm going to trade out my tool set, and then I'm going to go on and figure out how to do this and continue to work in that fashion. But a month after I left, my best friend in the teams and a number of other former teammates and service members were killed when their helicopter was shot down. And that was a really hard thing for me because right away it put me in this headspace of reevaluating and reassessing. Did I leave for the right reasons? Was I selfish for leaving my community? Did I need to go back in and do I need to avenge people's deaths? Do I need to get back in and make sure that I'm taking a strain for this mission and this cause? Like, just so many questions came up that made that particular year, especially after transitioning, really, really hard. But ultimately, I came back to this idea that the reasons for transitioning out, I knew I wanted to have a family at some point, and I knew I wanted to be there to be present and invest in the family. And I couldn't see how people do it, and my hat's off to them, but I couldn't see how I could give what the teams needed and then also give my family what they would need. And so went through all of that, spent a few months traveling around. I spent a few months in Indonesia, just spending time in nature and doing a lot of self-reflection and evaluating. What I came back to is that ultimately my decisions for leaving were right. And this idea that I can still continue to serve outside of uniform holds true. And so that's where I ended up. It didn't make, after I made it through that first year, I was in business school alongside a lot of really smart, amazingly talented people with different backgrounds and perspectives. But it took me years to fully transition out of the military. And look, I'm at a place now where I've been out for just as long as I was in, which is a strange thing for me because in my mind, I'm still very much a SEAL. I still think and operate and move through the world in a certain way, but there's a little bit of like still transitioning every day.
Sure.
So yeah, I don't know. It's been challenging, but the things that have allowed me or that have supported me through that transition is leaning back into the relationships and the relationships, both in the teams and outside of the teams that have served me. And then also coming back to purpose and service. Like, what is the thing that I'm serving? And does it matter? And if it does, then I'm right where I need to be. So.
I can't even fathom what that must have been like to have had that extreme loss right after you left. I mean, the timing of it, to have it happen at all is devastating, but to have it be right after you left, I just imagine, yeah, that must have been really, really tough. And, you signed up as a SEAL. You're basically saying, I'm willing to give my life for this cause, and it's life and death, right? Like that's part of the job, and it's part of your everyday experience. And I wonder how that informs your life now, to lose people so close to you, so many people that were your close friends. And I don't know if you lost people when you were active in the field, but it was certainly knocking on your door as a possibility, that wasn't out of the realm of possibility. So that was your job for 9 years, is that like death is right here. And I know many spiritual teachers preach about how actually meditating on death can be a really amazing way to fully lead your life in a more alive way. In your day-to-day life now, having such intimacy with this idea of death and having lost people that, you could have been on that plane, does that inform your life in any way or help you lead a more full life now?
In short, absolutely. I mean, I think what you come to appreciate if you've been around a lot of loss, or if you're in a profession where loss is an expected part of the job, is that life is precious and it's finite and it has an end. And everyone that puts on that uniform in the teams recognizes that this is a part of this job, that every year we're going to lose one or two people. Some years we'll lose more. That particular year we lost more than we've ever lost before at any given any one time. But in that preciousness is this recognition that what you're doing matters and is important. And it's, I can't overstate how much it means to serve something and to believe in something so much that you're willing to give your life for it, right? That is a really powerful thing. And so for you, I have no doubt in my mind that you would say, I'd be willing to jump in front of a bus for my child and for my husband.
100%.
And that, yeah. And so to have that visceral connection to something outside yourself that you're willing to give your life for, I think is really, really powerful. It's a powerful space to be. But then to be in that space and lose people and to have people pay the ultimate sacrifice makes you realize that while death is always tragic and you never want to lose anyone, you recognize that those people who lost their life, they wouldn't trade a day of their life for that. Like they knew what they were getting into and they recognize that life is precious and scarce. And so let's use it in a way that matters and that makes a big difference for yourself, for those you care about, for whatever that causes. And so if it's spending time with yourself and connecting with the fact that this life is going to end, that's the only thing we can be certain about, and not view that as something to be fearful of or something that should create anxiety or stress, but rather something that just highlights the fact of how precious every day is and how that you should try to get the most of, to live a lifetime in a day, right? What is the type of life that you want to live? Well, live it today, be that person today, and recognize that every day is a new life. And that's the best way to get the most from life. So I don't know if I answered your question, but
You absolutely did.
That's how I think about it.
Absolutely. And how many things in our daily life that we give energy to, they're just these annoyances or irritations that, like, if we knew, like, we weren't going to see that person again, we wouldn't even care. It's such I think people are generally happier if they actually meditate on the shortness of life and how fragile it is, because the stuff that really matters rises to the surface, I think.
Totally.
Okay, so switching gears a little bit, you obviously talk about, making this impact in the world and creating something that's meaningful to you. So let's talk about Madefor, which is your current endeavor, and you're on a mission to help people fulfill their truest potential, which is really what this show is all about and what I'm so passionate about. And you've created an incredible program, you and Blake Mykoski and Andrew Huberman and your team of incredible people, including my husband, that you guys have created this incredible thing that I want you to explain to us, that is essentially can help people change their lives and lead more meaningful lives. So tell us about Madefor.
Yeah, our mission is to help people bring their best to the world, because we believe that a better world begins with the best you. And it sounds lofty, but I really believe that if people can connect with their capacity to bring their best to their day, whether it's how they're interacting with their families or their teammates, or even people that they come across with on the street, that knock-on effect of that is transformational and can make a really big difference in this world. And so Madefor is a 10-month program, and it's a program of small steps over time. So when I was going through SEAL training, one of the things that really stuck with me is that we started training with around 220 people. We went into Hell Week with 150. We came out of Hell Week with 36. And then my class ended up graduating 17 original members from that class. And so how do you go from 220 to 17? And I remember looking at these 17 people and thinking, you are really unremarkable looking. There's nothing special about you. I would not be able to pick you out from a lineup. But at the same time, all of the biggest, fastest, strongest people, those with the natural gifts and talents, were some of the first to go away and decide that they couldn't continue training for whatever reason. And that left a big impression on me. It's like, wow, what is going on Is it a mental thing? Is it a foundational practice thing? What's happening in these individuals? But I saw some themes continue to play out with people that were successful in training and in operational cycles and in deployments that really stuck with me. And then fast forward a couple of years, or a few years later, I was in business school, and I audited an undergraduate class taught by this woman, Angela Duckworth, who does a lot of research on grit as a determining factor for success, which I really I believe in, because that bodes well for me. But she taught this course on positive psychology, and positive psychology is all about this premise of, for the longest time, the field of psychology and psychiatry and medicine focused on how can we reduce negative outcomes and stress and disease, and focused on minimizing downside risk. And the gentleman that is really championing this field, his name is Dr. Martin Seligman. Marty said, hey, that's great, but that's half of the equation. The other half of the equation is, what is it that we can connect with that's good, that can grow the good inside of us, whether it's from a habit standpoint or a mindset standpoint, or even things in our environment that we can change that bring out the good in us. And that is also equally as, if not more important than focusing on minimizing the negative stuff. And so a lot of what they presented in that course mapped back to things that I was seeing in the SEAL teams. And I said, well, this is really cool. This is something that I would like to work on someday. And Blake and I were on a trip, and Blake asked this question to the group. He said, if you could work on anything and there were no restrictions, money was no object, what would you want to work on? And I said, man, I would love to work in this area of human potential, of helping people connect with their capacity to do more and to live more fulfilling and enriching lives. I said, from what I saw on the teams and some of this research that I've been exposed to and continue to explore, I just think there's something there that everyone has this unlocked potential and capacity inside them, but for whatever reason, they haven't found a way to connect with it. And so that was really the genesis and the start of working on Madefor, when we brought very early on, Dr. Andrew Huberman is a neuroscientist out of Stanford University, was an informal advisor and a friend, and then very quickly became a formal advisor. And then in our work together, what we realized is that the thing that can help people unlock their full potential is nothing that you see on the market currently. It's not a pill, it's not a potion, it's not a hack or a high-speed piece of technology, but rather it is a return to some basic foundational practices, a body and mind that for whatever reason we've grown disconnected with, right? People want quick fix solutions. They want latest and greatest things, and that's what the market wants to push them. But what we found in our research and what the science would support is that there are some very basic things, and you can engage them in very basic ways that can really make a meaningful difference for you. And so that's what we built Madefor on, is this idea that small, intentional, purposeful steps, taking small positive pursuits over a period of time in a very specific way, can really help unlock capacity inside you and help you generate internal rewards from the inside out in an enduring way. And so that's how we think about it. So every month focuses on one foundational area of practice. We deliver the science, the tools, and the steps that someone should take during that month. And we've really distilled it down to the essential elements. So what we're trying to do is get someone to exert just enough effort so that they'll see the benefits of their actions and be incentivized to grow practice as it's right for them. So the goal of Madefor really is that you get to the end of these 10 months, not with a checklist of 10 things that you have to do every day, but rather that now your reflexive self has become your best self, that you're moving through the world, you're encountering stress and friction in a different way, you have a different relationship with yourself and with others, so that you feel more connected, more empowered, have greater agency, and can really figure out what it is that you're made for, and change the trajectory of your life. So that's what we've been working on.
Who doesn't need more of that in their life is what I'd like to know. This should be required in all schools. So I really can't overstate. I was lucky enough to kind of get to see the inner workings of this coming to life, and like the care and intention that went into every little detail of this program is phenomenal. And I've gotten to see the final product and experience it. And I know this is something our audience would absolutely love. Based on, if you're listening to this show, essentially Madefor is a product to help you put into actual practice all the things that we talk about on this show. So everybody check this out. We'll put links and everything to it. But to further delve into the Madefor, I think that an important point is Carol Dweck wrote a book called Mindset, and where she talks about the difference between a growth mindset and a fixed mindset. And I think that that really helped drive home for me some of the mental aspect of how Madefor can help really rewire your brain. So can you first off explain what a fixed mindset and a growth mindset is, and then how Madefor really helps us become more growth mindset oriented?
Yeah, I love that you brought this up because the research shows that even just talking about this and understanding that there's a growth mindset and a fixed mindset, and that both exist inside everyone, and they come out in different ways at different times, can actually help you perform better. So I'm glad that we're talking about this, because if nothing else, your listeners are going to benefit from hearing this. And so the idea of a growth mindset for a fixed mind versus a fixed mindset really came out of the work that Carol was doing with elementary school students. And so what she was doing, she had elementary school students solving different logic and math problems. And they were getting progressively and progressively harder, to the point where she started giving them problems that were impossible to solve, because she wanted to see how they would react to that. And she found that there was a small subset of children that, when given problems that were unsolvable, even when they were told that they were unsolvable, they actually enjoyed the process of trying to solve the problem. They found that it got them excited, and like the harder it became, the more excited they got. And she was like, wow, what is happening with these kids? This is pretty wild. And so that was really the start of her research in this field, and really, shining a light on what was happening. And what she found is that people that have a growth mindset recognize that the friction that they're feeling, the stress that they're feeling, is a sign that they're getting better, that this is what it feels like to grow stronger. And the other side of the coin is those with a fixed mindset are people that may encounter stress, or may, try to shoot a free throw and find that they miss, 7 free throws in a row. They would assign that as a reflection of their capabilities and their self-worth. And so they look at it as friction I'm feeling or setbacks I'm experiencing is a direct reflection on my capacity to achieve. And that I am the type of person that does really well in football and baseball, but I don't do well in basketball, or I don't do well on math, or I'm someone that's not good at learning languages. You have this rigid understanding of your capabilities, and you don't think you can expand that you were born with a hardwired set of innate capabilities, and there's no expanding past that. But on the growth mindset side, it's this idea that, no, that friction that I'm feeling, those 7 baskets that I missed, that just means that I'm more likely to make this next one, that I'm figuring this problem out. And it's a really cool thing. And I think it's something that everyone can identify with, right? We all have those situations where we get into a little bit of discomfort, and we're like, oh, I'm not that type of person, or like, there's no way I'll be successful in this, or I don't like public speaking, or whatever the thing is. I think we've all seen this fixed mindset come out in us. But on the other side of it, knowing that you can reimagine that stress or that friction or those setbacks that you're experiencing in a way that actually can set you up for future success is pretty powerful. And so that's something we talk a lot about with our members. And one of the first things that I say during onboarding for our members is that, look, there is no perfect score in Madefor. Like, you are not going to bat 1,000 here, and you're not going to get A++ across the board. You are going to fail. You are going to experience setbacks. You're going to disengage at various points in time. But what I want you to do is imagine that through a growth mindset. When you feel like you've gone off track, recognize you've gone off track, extend yourself some grace, and recognize that, hey, you're human and this is part of life. And when you feel comfortable, nudge yourself back on course. And we're going to repeat that process many times over the course of 10 months, but that there's real value in the mindsets and the behaviors and the way of being that you're forging by doing that. To even bring it back to SEAL training, those people, the biggest, fastest, strongest people, those that were Olympians or that were always naturally gifted at something, it's wild to think that they could be so successful in one area, but the second that they're put in a situation of discomfort, that's when that fixed mindset comes up, and they're like, wow, I've never existed in this space where I couldn't just lean on my natural abilities. I must not have the ability to be a SEAL or to be successful in this. And they give into that moment and they end up leaving. So
I love that. And I just love the idea with Madefor of just it's actually like rewiring how you think of things, you know? It's just doing these little things perfectly in alignment with your whole goal of these small actions that have this greater impact.
yeah, there is no one step in made for that is that great or that out of reach or maybe even that earth shattering. But Andrew and Dr. Huberman likes to talk about this phenomenon of neuroplasticity, and he does a lot of research in that. And it's this idea that we have the ability to rewire our brain over the entire course of our life, right? Which is the ultimate growth mindset. It's like, oh wow, we have this capacity to rewire our brain and use the brain as a proxy for your mindset, for your behaviors, for your habits, for the way that you move through the world, for what you can achieve. You have this ability to rewire it. And he says that there are really two ways to do that. One is through a short, intense experience. It can be positive or negative, the birth of a child, the death of a loved one, food poisoning, a car accident, the first time that you score a goal in a game, or, whatever that thing is, that these peak experiences can rewire your brain, right? But the truth of it is that the peak experiences are the minority in life. That's the majority of life is made up of the climb, going up and downhill, right? It's not the mountaintop, it's not the peak. And so he said the other way that you can really leverage this capacity of neuroplasticity is through small intentional steps done over time with a little bit of awareness of the effects that those efforts are creating. And so we have this attention reward reinforcement loop that we consistently come back to with Madefor and all of these small steps. But that's where the magic happens, is in these small, seemingly inconsequential efforts engaged in a specific way, where you start to create subtle shifts in your behaviors and mindsets, and ultimately which get encoded into how your brain is wired. So
Cool. Before we leave the growth mindset idea, I'm more curious, just on a personal level,
yeah.
how do we foster this in our children? I mean,
Mm.
obviously they're not doing Madefor, so what are you guys doing anything? I mean, I need to reread that book as a parent now, because I'm just curious how we would, if you even know, or if you have applied that at all with your girls, of like how as parents we can ensure that our children have the growth mindset, because I assume it starts with us.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And Carol's written a lot about this in particular. I think in the simplest form, always praise effort over achievement, right? So if you're praising achievement, the child will map that achievement is the end goal, right? Instead of that, it's all about the reward and not the process. And what we want to try to do is we want to try to put rewards onto the process of effort, of the struggle, of working to figure something out, of leveraging creativity and ingenuity and effort. And those are the types of things that we want to celebrate rather than the outcome. And that probably is maybe one of the biggest and best things that we can do
Yeah.
with our children.
Yeah. Okay. So going back to originally, we were talking about purpose. Is the goal with Madefor to help people discover their purpose?
So the name Madefor has a few different meanings behind it. One is that our bodies and our brains are made for certain habits and certain practices, right? The way that humans are wired, our physiology, there are things that we can do, how we use our visual system, how we use our breath, how we engage with food, how we can direct our mind, that help us bring out the best in ourselves, right? So we're made for certain behaviors and practices. And so that's part of what we do it made for. If you can engage in those and connect with your capacity to bring your best to the world, you're going to start to figure out what it is that you're made for. If you're operating at 60% of your capacity, it's hard to achieve what it is that you're made for. I don't know, like what you're made for and what I'm made for, different things, right? We have different experiences and different purposes in life. But if we are handicapping ourselves and we don't have total agency in our life, then it's hard to really achieve and to bring forth what it is that we're made for. And the final message is that, like, we're all made for something more, right? Ideally, the best life is one that's lived of service, right? If we are mapping that we're made for something outside of ourselves, right? The work that Dr. Selman has done would show that the greater meaning and purpose you can attach to your efforts, the more return you're going to feel from those, the more value and the sense of fulfillment and accomplishment, and the greater level of flourishing you're going to have. And so that's really what Madefor is about. So we start Madefor with an intention, and we ask people to set an intention for where they want to be 10 months from now. They don't even know what steps they're going to be taking, but we say, hey, let's start and let's set an intention of where we want to be 10 months from now. Not so much what you want to achieve, but how do you want to be showing up in your life differently? And what does that do for you? How does that meaningfully affect you and the people that you care most about? And what we find is that over time with these steps, people naturally start finding opportunities to come into alignment with that intention so that they end up in a place where they're moving with greater purpose, greater clarity, and greater agency in their life. So the goal in Madefor in many ways is to help people figure that out for themselves without prescribing that, right? Or the answers to the individuals are unique. So,
And I love in Made for how it's a surprise, like how people don't know. I know the different steps, but I think that it's very cool that you just know what you're working on that month. These are the steps this month. And then next month, a new box arrives and you don't know what it's going to be. And it's just, you just take each step at a time. And I think that element of surprise is really cool.
Thanks. Yeah, there are two things about the kits that when we send them out is that one, we really want you to focus on one thing at a time, right? We don't want, there's so many things in our lives that are competing for our attention. And one of the things that was really important for us is that we work with members to carve out time and space in their lives, even in small bits of time and space, where they can connect their efforts with the benefits that those efforts deliver. And so it's why we focus on just one thing every month. And it's very, very simple. But in that simplicity, people go deeper and make bigger connections and see more returns on their efforts. And so that's been really cool to see that play out for people in a really powerful way. The other thing that we've done is that Madefor is an analog first program. And so all of the challenges that we've designed each month are meant to be done offline. There's no app or screen or device or gadget that you have to look at. And in fact, it's my viewpoint, and Andrew and a lot of the science would support this, that if I have to look at something outside of myself to see how I'm performing or how I'm feeling, I've missed a critical step, right? At a foundational first step level, I should understand what I'm doing and how it's affecting me. And I should be present and understand those effects. And so that's something that we work on over the course of 10 months is really creating greater sense of and capacity for interoceptive awareness. How are my actions affecting my body? What are my body's cues to me? So that you can have greater agency as you're moving through the day. So we're analog first in that regard. We have a variety of things that support from a digital standpoint, so that if someone needs some additional support or encouragement, they can lean into that. But first and foremost, it's one thing at a time, done offline, so that you can understand the benefits of the effort that you're exerting.
Awesome. I find in my life, the more stillness that I can find, the more space I have in between my thoughts, that's when my true wisdom kind of comes through. And I believe it's kind of a higher intelligence coming through. And that's where I can kind of tap into my authentic voice and who I truly am. And that's like where the wisdom is, not all the old voices and the patterns that are stopping me from achieving what I want to achieve or being the person I want to be. Do you believe that there is some sort of higher power or energy guiding us, like a higher intelligence?
I don't think you can look at the ocean or spend time in nature or move through the world and not think that there's something bigger than just us and ourselves at play. There's so much that we don't know, and there's so much magic in the mystery, and there's so much. For me personally, I can't engage with nature and not think that there's something bigger than ourselves. And I think there are just, there's so many ways to access that wisdom, or to create time and space to connect with that higher purpose, or that higher calling, or something that's bigger than yourself. But I think it's important that you find whatever that path is for you. For some, it's going to church on Sundays. For others, it's going surfing 3 days a week. For others, it's finding time and space on their mat to meditate, and connecting with their inner voice, in quiet moments. So the thing that I think is most important is that people are creating time and space in their lives to figure out how to connect with that higher power, because I think it's there. That's one of the things that has just struck me in working alongside our advisors, is that the more you learn about what we know and how the world works,
Mhm.
the more you just have to be convinced, like, man, there's something else at play here. The fact that there's a very narrow range of fractal patterns that exist in nature, and you find these patterns repeated all over the natural world. The
Mhm.
fact that that same pattern, when we walk into a new environment, that's the pattern our eyes scan at in that same fractal range. And so when you think about the synergy that happens when we go outside and we're walking through a forest, or we're walking on a mountainside, like, why we feel so calm and present, well, part of that is that our eyes are scanning the environment at the same pattern that the environment is giving us. And it's like, wow, okay, what's going on there? I mean, it's just so wild. It's like, it's mind blowing. And so to think that it's just cars on streets and big buildings and what we see in Instagram, and like, sorry, I don't buy it.
I love that. I love that. I always feel like when I'm in nature or I'm looking out into the ocean, I'm seeing kind of like the miraculousness of myself reflected back. It's just like
Hmm.
that same fractal pattern, that same energy. It's just like you recognize your own. I just think of it as we're all this one thing, and we're reminded of that amazing power. And it's not that it's like about me or about you or about the person, but it's just like, oh, like I recognize that because it's part of me, you know?
Hmm. There's an old comic strip called Dilbert, and I don't remember the gentleman's name who wrote it, but he wrote a book a number of years ago called God's Debris. And the whole premise of the book is that God has essentially blown himself up, and that the universe and everything that we see is all elements of God. And so,
Yeah.
to your point around, you're seeing yourself in the things around you, and like, I
Yeah.
feel like we are only scratching the surface of understanding how interconnected the world is. And I
Yes.
think we are far more connected than we realize. So,
Yes. Yes. Do you believe that this is like really going out there and I wasn't planning on saying this, but do you feel like, I mean, you can be in contact or that you feel the people that you've lost, you feel them in your life now?
yes,
Yeah.
yeah.
Is it like a sign, like you see a butterfly or like a thing, or is it just an energy?
So, I've been to a lot of funerals, and one thing that I really love about funerals is that you have everyone that's ever known this person or feels connected to this person coming together. And just by the fact that that individual that has passed on has spent time and given their energy and their way of thinking to all of these people that are now assembled, in many ways I view it as like that person is there, like that person
Mm,
is represented by all these people, and now they're coming together. And so just stop and feeling like every funeral that I've been to for someone that I was really connected with, I felt like that person was there because their energy existed in all of these people that were coming together. And so everyone that I've ever been close with or connected with, I feel like I'm still carrying a part of them inside me. And so I see them in moments throughout the day. I see Jonas and my daughters when they're laughing a certain way. I see friends. I feel their presence in different times, and I feel that sometimes I have to quiet my mind and to just settle into a moment to really to feel them around. But they're there. There's no question about it. So.
mm. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Oh, goodness. I'm just loving talking to you. I think that we're winding down here. Why do you think humanity? Why do you think we're here as a species? Do you think that, why are we on this planet?
Whew, that's a big question.
I know.
In many ways, that a similar way of asking that question is like, what is the purpose of life? Like, what is the purpose of our lives? And I fully subscribe to and believe that the purpose of life is to enjoy it. It's not coincidence that a lot of the big philosophies and religions have similar tenets of serving something bigger than yourself, of being kind to your neighbor, of being present with your family. All of the things that are espoused by all the major religions and a lot of the philosophies are things that help you find meaning and purpose and really savor and enjoy life. And that's not to say that life is always going to be easy or you're not going to encounter friction, but there is a way to engage life such that you can get the most out of every day. and at the end of the day feel enriched and like that you're in a state of flourishing and that you're really thriving. And I think that's the purpose, right?
Mm.
Because we're only going to be here for a very brief moment and then we're going to be gone. Someone else will be here. And at some point, this ever expanding universe is going to, at least what the physicists say, is going to collapse and go in the other direction, and it's going to erupt again. And so yeah, this moment, back to your earlier question around death, it's like this is scarce and it's precious. And the one thing that would be a travesty is to not savor and enjoy it. And I think you can do that best by finding things outside yourself to serve. So yeah.
Oh, it's beautiful. All right. So Pat, before we wind down, where can people find you, learn more about Madefor? Give us all the info.
Yeah, awesome. You can find out more about Madefor on Instagram at Madefor, Madefor, or you can go to our website, www.getmadefor.com. And you can follow me. I'm on Instagram at Madefor_Pat. If any of your listeners, if you want to try Madefor out or you're interested in learning more, get on our website or email us or drop us a line on Instagram. But if you decide you want to do it, the team's put together a code for your listeners. So if you go through checkout and at checkout you enter the code MFSOUL, SOUL, that'll get you 20% off the program. And yeah, just excited, looking forward to serving any of your members that decide they want to do it. And look, the final thing that I'll say is that Madefor, we've spent a lot of time on building a cool brand and a cool experience. But at the end of the day, it's not about the science and it's not about the tools. It's not about the steps. It's not even about the support that we give. It's the benefit of Madefor comes from the effort that you exert over time. And if you want to do it and you're willing to put forth a little bit of effort every day, it's an incredibly rewarding program, and we'd be excited to serve you. But if you decide not to do Madefor, that's cool too. I would just say that my biggest thing that I try to tell people is if you can't find a way to be present, a little bit more present throughout your day, and recognize that the day is made up of so many small moments that can be engaged in such a way that build you up and make you better and bring you closer to the things that you love. Even if you can just find one thing in your day to do that, it's worth doing, because over time that can be a powerful entry point and change the trajectory of not only your day, but weeks, months, years, and your life. So please give it a shot.
Amazing. All right. Thank you so much, Pat, for being here with me today. I've just loved this so much. I loved every minute of it.
Thank you for having me. It's been an honor. I'm just a big fan of all things Cordial. So big fan of your family, and I can't wait for Rebel and Sailor and Jax to reconvene again soon.